spaghetti. Hello, we are live again. It is so good to see you. As this is being recorded, we are approaching the vernal equinox. And when I looked at the sunrise sunset times today for my part of the world, they're only 1 minute apart, which means it's almost here. Yay! I'm excited as usual because we get to talk about the Bhagavad Gita together. And we are in chapter 2. We'll be in chapter 2 for a while, most likely, because it's so full of important information that's still applicable to us today. It appears to be about this prince from a long time ago on a battlefield who's got to fight a war and he doesn't want to. But it's really about us and the conflicts we face in life that we don't want to. What Krishna is saying now to Arjuna in chapter 2 is profoundly important. In chapter 2, there's this huge focus on death, which can seem very morbid. But for those of us setting foot on the spiritual path, there must be some sorts of death. In fact, in one tradition in India, if you commit fully to a spiritual path, you have your own funeral rites and you are pronounced dead. Basically, you're dead to your family, you're dead to those who knew you. You no longer have a hometown. What prompts something this extreme? Well, one of the things that we're urged to look at as we set foot on the spiritual path with chapter 2 is, what are we called? There's a wonderful way in Spanish for saying, instead of what's your name, it's what are you called? How are you called? And that is a great distinction. Here in English, we say, my name is, instead of I am called. And we need to think about that very much because what we are named and what we are called influences us greatly. And usually we have absolutely no say in the matter. For example, when I was born, I was given a name. Nobody asked me, hey, what do you think your name is? And I grew up with that name and all its connotations, including the last name, which implies certain ethnic backgrounds, for example. I was labeled right away as a certain gender. I was labeled as a certain religion and brought up in a certain society, certain nationality ascribed to me right off the get-go. And as I progressed through life, it was made very clear what my career paths could and could not be, should or should not be, where I was going to go to school, what I was going to learn, what language I spoke, and language so shapes the brain. All these decisions were made for me. And yet, when asked to describe myself, who are you? I might say, well, I'm an American, I am a woman, I am of Sicilian heritage, but none of those really authentically came from inside. Those are things I was called and that I bought into. And they describe my life in a way. And many of us, when we live from who we think we are, we're living from what others have called us. We're not living from going within and going and examining, who am I? What should I call myself? How do I think about myself? How do I label myself? How do I want to be in the world? How many things in my life have been put upon me, including diet, right? What things we should and should not eat. That's very different in different parts of the world. What things have been put upon me and what's genuinely me. And that's something Arjun's going through right now. And Krishna, in some ways, is teasing him a little. He calls him by various nicknames like son of Pandu, when everybody knows Arjun is not really Pandu's biological son, but he's called a Pandava, for example. And he's labeled as a prince, and he's labeled as this and that. And a prince should behave this way. Is that the way Arjun wants to behave inside? All this conflict. A lot of the conflict we see in the world just mirrors this conflict within ourselves from not feeling genuine and not being able to, in our minds, live up to all these labels we've been given. They don't feel right, but there's a part of us that says, but they must be right. They've been given to me by people I love, my parents, my grandparents, my family, my teachers, etc. And that's why Arjun faces those people on the battlefield, all these folks who have been labeling him and telling him who he has to be. Krishna is saying, now, Arjun, you have to face death, not the death of who you really are, because that can never die, but the death of who you've bought into, the death of the labels you have adopted, probably without even knowing that they're not authentically yours. So today, as we meditate, I encourage you to reflect. This kind of ties into something we talked about earlier when we talked about who are you. This is a shade of nuance different. What do you call yourself? When you talk about yourself to others or in your head, what do you call yourself? And is that truly authentic to you, or is it a label that you need to let die, to move on? Deep stuff. Let's become balanced in mind so that we can approach this with a calm and equanimity. We've been talking about equanimity meaning being yourself, but if you don't know who you are, how can you be yourself? You're being somebody else. Oh, kitty cat. You don't. The door wins today. I'll be knocking to let you know when to switch. Bye-bye. Nice. Before I go back out to meditate, and hopefully you'll join me, I just wanted to say a little bit more about this idea of calling somebody something. You know, in the Bible, Adam, or man, was given the power to name animals. He didn't ask the animals what they wanted to be called. He got to impose his idea. And that's a lot of power. And when I think of an animal, this guy's watching me. Now, I think of what we call him, Oliver. He has so many names. Narayana, Jones, after the only smart character in the whole Aliens franchise. He also has other names like Buddy, Freak, P. Diddy, P. Daddy, and one of my favorites, probably closest to what he would say about himself. Kathy calls him Asamasa Busa, but we call him many things. What would Oliver say his name was if he could speak? Maybe that's a difference between dogs and cats. Dogs are like, oh, that's my name. And cats are like, well, I'll answer to that. But no, that's not me. So, what do you answer to? And who are you really? Something to contemplate. 4-5. See you then. Stay safe. Welcome back. Time has flown once again. Thank you so much for being part of this. Today's dedication is to that which cannot be named. We'll build further on our discussion tomorrow, and I hope you will join us for that. Until then.